the First Amendment originally had freedom of association, where you as a business owner would be able to associate with whoever you want to. So it wouldn't be like Jim Crow, where you cannot have certain people drink from the same water fountain and so on. This would be purely based on the desire of the person who has the business, as far as who you employ, as far as if you're running a hotel, who can stay in your hotel. Obviously, it was very bad when people racially discriminated against people based on those characteristics, but the problem is that if I were to be devil's advocate here, would the government not have more control now over the decisions that people make and start this slow creep into more tyranny when there is less of that freedom of association? Like, ideally, people would have association with people based on the content of their character as opposed to the color of their skin, and I can understand why that would be taken away.
When Jim Crow was ended in America, when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, in addition to preventing states from instituting Jim Crow laws, it also made employers discriminating illegal on the basis of race. And I think the first thing has ended up being much more important and unambiguously good than the second thing. Obviously, states cannot make laws that separate people on the basis of race. That was the most important achievement of the Civil Rights era, was getting rid of the Jim Crow legal regime. This other thing, making it illegal for employers at like a mom and pop shop to racially discriminate, makes sense first glance, but then what's actually happened in practice is that there have been an absolute flood of lawsuits, many of which are bullshit. You know, someone gets fired, and if you get fired, it is really tempting to play the race card if you're black, even if that had nothing to do with it. What's happened is, you know, the EEOC, which is our body for litigating these kind of racism lawsuits, it's basically gotten to the point where many employers would prefer simply not to hire a black person to begin with because they're worried they would never be able to fire them. Right. And employers won't say this out loud, but if you have a restaurant and you have a black waitress versus a white waitress, you may simply view the black waitress as a ticking time bomb in a volatile industry where you may have to fire her for some reason. And if she claims racism, that's a lawsuit for you. It's legal fees. Whereas the white waitress, if you need to fire her, you can, and it won't ruin your business. And so you just go for the white waitress. And so I think that the effect of actually banning employment discrimination has been far less, it's less unambiguously good than many people would want to think.
If there is one other thing I wanted to say about that is, with my own family's perspective in the former USSR and Russia, going back generations, there was a lot of discrimination not based on racial characteristics, but based on class, where you would have former serfs who were freed, who were not allowed to have certain jobs, were not allowed to have higher end work, even if they were perfectly capable of doing it. So they couldn't be promoted to a certain position. They would have to remain in a low position. And I think that things of that nature breed resentment over time. The ideal, I think, and I think all of us could agree on, even if, Ernst, you may not like the way liberalism has fared so far, the ideal, I think, would be having a system where people could be fairly, as far as possible, judged on what they bring to the table, regardless of any other features, and that way people feel like if I work hard enough, and if I work smart enough, then they are going to hire me, I'm going to be able to work, or if I'm not good enough, then it's only on me. It's only on my lack of ability to do something, and, life ain't fair. So that, I think, would be the ideal that we could all agree on, but Ernst, you don't really see this working out in practice. So we can take this conversation wherever you want, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, I think you make an important point there, and that is maybe to add it to the South African context, and I think maybe the context that the United States might find itself in the future. When things start going wrong, when times are not good, for example, in South Africa, where I had to check my rolling blackout schedule before I could could tell you I could do the stream, that's my reality. And that reality is a reality of where these types of discriminatory laws have just taken over. They are the precedent. They enjoy priority over pragmatism. So when it comes to something as critical as power generation for the entire country, where the country has had rolling blackouts for more than a decade, the government just can't leave it. They can't leave the racial agenda. They have to have the racial agenda. But as I said earlier, there are fanatics within the ANC that do it because they are genuinely just ideologically possessed. But there are others within most, I think, are driven by the fact that racially discriminatory laws are just the perfect vehicle for corruption. It's just the perfect vehicle, firstly, to get people in positions that are loyal to you, and secondly, to get people into positions that you want to benefit, people that you want to give a nice ticket on the gravy train. That's why they cling to it so much. And unfortunately, many people in South Africa don't see it that way. Many people still see it on face value of, oh, it's called Black economic empowerment. Its stated goals are to empower Black people and to right the wrongs of the past. Therefore, it must be good. But like I said, in South Africa and many similar countries, when things get as dire as they have become here in many facets, you have to leave that idealism and see things for what they are. And that's the thing. When it comes to South Africa, Coleman said much earlier in the stream, he talked about rejecting racially discriminatory policies based on it being wrong in principle, not because it's just the wrong type of discrimination at the time. And that's the line of thought that we've seen in South Africa. You can actually see that thought in action. I was doing a panel debate on one of the biggest channels in South Africa, and we were debating. I was on a panel with two other guests, and one of the guests was someone that supported Black economic empowerment policies or racially discriminatory policies. And he made the argument that these things are necessary, that we can't just reject them because they're wrong in principle. My stance was, call me controversial, but racially discriminatory laws, literal systemic racism is wrong in principle, no matter who it benefits. But this person was not able to see it that way. He only saw it through the lens of we need to now have positive discrimination to right the wrongs of the past. But all you do is you're digging a new pothole to fill an old one. I don't know if you even know what a pothole is, Lev, or anyone in America. It's a hole in the road.
Of course.
Because the road is not being maintained.
Oh, believe me, New York City.
We have many potholes.
Yeah.
Right, just making sure. But because I just see many people looking at South Africa's problems and they seem alien. They're like, they don't even have a frame of reference for some of the problems that we have. And I have to kind of remind them that you can very realistically go down this path of South Africanization. And as I said earlier, South Africanization is a mindset. It's a philosophy of government. And I see a lot of your politicians there in the US flirting with this philosophy. They flirt with this philosophy of governance. They were to get drunk on that ideology, you're going to go down the same path if enough of them start following it. When it comes to racially discriminatory laws in South Africa, the liberalism on paper would state, well, people would reject these laws based on them being in principle wrong, but you have a government that has dozens of racially discriminatory laws, and these racially discriminatory laws directly contributing towards many key services like electricity generation failing, and that government is not voted out. Now the ANC is in trouble in regards to the next election. Things don't seem that nice, but the fact that they've been able to cling on to power for more than almost 30 years also raises some interesting and important questions about voting and assumptions about democracy, that people will just recognize, well, this government isn't doing a good job.